The Second War for Armageddon begins on the Feast of the Emperor's Ascension, 941 M41. The exact day isn't a coincidence the Orks planned. It's a coincidence an Inquisitor noticed. That same year, a classified operational review is filed in an archive on Mars. The author reconstructed here is Inquisitor Bronislaw Czevak, a real canonical character, documented by the Lexicanum as a High Inquisitor of the Ordo Xenos, described as distinguished, controversial, and deeply learned in the psychology of alien civilizations, active during the second half of the 41st millennium. His documented canonical specialization is the Eldar and the Black Library. He isn't on any public record as an Ork psychic warfare specialist. He is on record as an alien psychologist of the highest inquisitorial clearance, operating under the institutional mandate of the Ordo Xenos, whose charter covers the study and exploitation of all alien psychic capabilities threatening or useful to humanity.
First flag. The document attributed to him in what follows is a reconstruction. The specific title, the specific filing date, and the specific policy content are this script's framing device, not a Black Library publication. The character is canonical. The report isn't. That distinction will be maintained throughout. What is preserved in the canonical operational record across multiple Black Library novels, across decades of Codex lore, across the documented history of 3 specific individuals, is a pattern the reconstruction exists to name. The standing policy of the Imperium of Man toward the Ork race isn't containment. The Codex Imperialis calls it containment. The argument here is that the Inquisition has, for a very long time, been running something else. A deliberate cultivation of Ork belief in selected Imperial heroes' immortality, producing through the canonical Ork psychic belief mechanism a probability field that materially extends those heroes' actual operational lifespans. 3 cases. First, Commissar Sebastian Yarrick. Second, Commissar Ciaphas Cain. Third, the Emperor of Mankind on the Golden Throne. The question the Czevak review refuses to answer on its final page is the question this script is going to answer now. Everything that follows depends on one confirmed canonical fact. The Ork race generates a collective psychic field. The Warhammer 40,000 fandom wiki, drawing from multiple codex editions, states it directly. If enough Orks believe something is true, then it will actually become so, brought into being in real space through the power of the immaterium by their gestalt psychic ability. The Space Marine wiki phrasing is more compact. The Waaagh field warps reality to fit Orkish expectations. This faculty has been present in the lore since the first edition. It appears in the 4th, 7th, 8th, and 9th edition codex, Orks entries. It's the most consistently documented psychic mechanism in the canonical Imperial knowledge base. The most famous specific confirmation is Codex, Orks, 4th edition, page 93. Orks believe that a vehicle that has been painted red can outstrip a similar vehicle that isn't. As odd as it may seem, they are quite right. The vehicles go faster, not because of the paint's chemistry, because enough Orks believe the paint works. The field does the rest. The same principle governs the weapons.
Ork guns, captured and tested by Imperial forces, frequently fail to function in non-Ork hands. The 3rd edition codex contains a canonical sidebar from a Mechanicus Magos who theorizes that Ork collective belief prevents the jams and malfunctions that the weapon's crude construction should guarantee. The Mechanicus first formally noticed this during the War of the Beast, Approximately 546 M32, the Lexicanum's Waaagh entry, citing the novel Predator, Prey, records that members of the Adeptus Mechanicus observed Ork weapons only seemed to activate when they came into contact with a greenskin. That observation is now approximately 7,000 years old in post-heresy imperial records. The mechanism isn't limitless. Consistent canonical analysis across multiple sources establishes the critical distinction. The Waaagh field isn't a wish engine. It can't create a working weapon from nothing. What it does is tip probabilities.
A scrap metal gun that should jam 90% of the time jams 10% of the time, when sufficient Ork belief backs it. A vehicle performs beyond its physical ceiling when the field's expectation enhancement is active. Orks are, as one widely cited framing puts it, reality pushers rather than reality creators. Scaling determines power. Codex, Orks, 9th edition, page 67, designates the field formally as Waaagh energy and confirms its scaling. More Orks, stronger field. The Weird Boys, documented across canonical sources as focal points for the psychic energy generated by the surrounding warband, capable of channeling and unleashing it as devastating warp attacks, are amplifiers for a field that was already enormous before they opened their mouths. A Weird Boy in a Waaagh of millions is channeling an output the entire warband has already generated. The fandom wiki's Gork and Mork entry places the Ork theological economy in its widest structural context. The twin Ork gods are much like the Chaos gods, the lost Eldari pantheon, or the emperor of mankind's faith entity. Gork and Mork exist because Ork collective psychic output creates and sustains them. The mechanism that makes red vehicles faster is the same mechanism that manifests the Ork gods. The difference is scale, coherence, and direction. The Ordo Xenos has institutional knowledge of all of this. The Inquisition, documented as the Imperium's secret police and primary intelligence service, has both the operational reach and the classified archive infrastructure to have done something with it. The radical Xenos Hybris faction, a canonical grouping within the Inquisition of Inquisitors who believe in exploiting alien capabilities for human benefit, provides the ideological framework for a program that official imperial policy would never sanction. The Inquisitorial representative sits on the High Lords of Terra as one of the 12. But not everything the Inquisition files passes through the Senatorum Imperialis for the record.
In the Inquisition's documented operational culture, an Inquisitor's authority is theoretically unlimited. Accountability requires enforcement. Enforcement requires awareness. The absence of a record is its own kind of record. Sebastian Yarrick is born Sebastian Varden on the world of Taus III according to the Lexicanum. Orphaned at age 7, raised by his grandfather. He earns commissar's rank through the Officio Praefectus and serves through multiple campaigns before the name Armageddon enters the operational file. The Second War for Armageddon runs 941 M41 to 943 M41. Gazgul Mag Uruk Thraka brings 5 Ork tribes to the planet, the largest greenskin Waaagh to threaten the Segmentum Solar in the post-heresy period. Yarrick is assigned to Hades' Hive. He holds it.
He holds it through conditions the Fandom Wiki's second war article describes without softening. Rations of rats and roaches. Ventilation shafts cleared hand-to-hand against Gazgul's commandos. The Ork warlord personally cycling through every tactical option in his vocabulary against a single hive that wouldn't fall. During the fighting, Warboss Ugelhard takes Yarrick's arm. Yarrick takes Ugelhard's own power claw and attaches it to the stump. An eye goes to the war. A bionic replacement comes back. The Orks call him Old Baal Eye, an Ork theological epithet, generated spontaneously in the greenskin cultural vocabulary, applied to a human who has reversed the expected power dynamic. Old Baal Eye took the weapon of a war boss. Old Baal Eye holds when everything should have broken. The Ork belief forms organically, without inquisitorial intervention. Yarrick's survival and his trophies are the seed. Between the Second and Third Wars comes the Battle of Golgotha.
Gazgul catches Yarrick pursuing him. He captures the Commissar. He wins. He then releases him. Canonical accounts record the stated reason. Gazgul let him go because the morale of the Imperial defenders was so devastated. David Annandale's novella, Chains of Golgotha, published by Black Library, preserves Yarrick's own account of the captivity, the months of psychological damage, and the moment Gazgul staged a farewell parade for the man he was supposed to have killed. The greatest Ork warlord of the era publicly celebrated the survival of the human he chose not to execute. In Ork theological terms, that isn't a military decision. That is a consecration. 57 years pass. The Third War begins 998 M41, 57 years to the day from the Second War's start, confirmed by the Lexicanum. Yarrick comes out of retirement. He was already called the Old Man during the Second War. Add 57 years. He forges the Imperial defense into what canonical sources describe as an unstoppable machine of iron and steel, then leaves Armageddon to hunt Gazgul personally. His longevity isn't in isolation the argument. The Lexicanum documents Ciaphas Cain as canonically over 200 years old during active service. Senior Imperial officers access rejuvenation treatments. The anomaly isn't the number. It's the relationship between the number and the operational context. Armageddon is the most sustained, high-density Ork-populated conflict in the Imperium's 41st millennium history. Gazgul's Third War Waaagh is documented as larger than anything that preceded it. The feral Ork population that developed in the equatorial jungle between the wars, surviving remnants of the Second War who devolved after its end, documented in the Lexicanum's Armageddon geography articles, maintained the Second War's belief structures in a living Ork population for 50 years before Gazgul's return. 50 years of Old Baal Eye legends, propagated through a feral Ork network that had no reason to stop believing them, circulating freely through the same theological economy that Gazgul's new Waaagh would eventually absorb when it arrived. The canonical mechanics of the Waaagh field predict that a human figure operating at the center of that sustained belief network, a figure Gazgul himself had theologically certified as survivable by releasing rather than executing, would receive a probability supplement on survival outcomes. The supplement does not guarantee immortality. Orks can't wish impossible things true.
What it does is make survival marginally more likely in every engagement, and compounding marginally more likely across 6 decades in one sustained theater produces a statistical record that looks different from what natural lifespan and rejuvenation access alone would produce. Second flag. The specific seeding mechanisms. What the Armageddon Ork hunters carried into feral Ork populations during 50 years of jungle operations. What Vox traffic in the Armageddon theater fed into Ork-adjacent psychic reception fields. What proportion of documented Imperial propaganda operations were calibrated toward Ork theological reception are operational reconstructions from canonical capabilities. The Armageddon Ork hunters are documented in White Dwarf 264, and the Armageddon chapter-approved Annual 2003. Their operational contact with feral orc populations over 5 decades is confirmed. What they said to those populations isn't. The boundary between what the conditions permitted and what the Inquisition chose to exploit is exactly where the uncertainty sits. The effects are in the record. The intention is inferred. Ciaphas Cain first appears in Sandy Mitchell's short story Fight or Flight, published by Black Library in 2002. The novel series runs to 11 volumes and 10 short stories through Vainglorious in 2023. The Lexicanum states his canonical age, over 200 years old during active service in the last century of M41. In a profession where front-line commissars routinely absorb the blast of whatever Imperial Guard regiment they are assigned to, 2 centuries is a number that requires explanation. The series' structural engine is the gap between reputation and reality. Cain privately believes himself a coward. The wider Imperium believes him a hero of the First Order. Every attempt he makes to secure a safer posting results in a more dangerous assignment. He survives orcs in caves of ice, an entire orc-occupied continent in death or glory, chaos in the traitor's hand, gene stealers in duty calls, necrons in echoes of the tomb. The short story, The Only Good Orc, is explicit in the title. Orc encounters recur across the canonical timeline of his career. The Amberley Vale framing is the institutional fingerprint. Vale is canonically an Inquisitor of the Ordo Xenos, confirmed by the Lexicanum, the series articles, multiple canonical sources. She collects Cain's personal memoirs, edits them, annotates them, and circulates them among fellow Ordo members as the Cain Archive. An Ordo Xenos Inquisitor, the same institutional branch responsible for documenting alien psychic phenomena, finds the career record of a man who survives impossible odds against alien species across 2 centuries worth preserving, editing, and distributing to fellow Inquisitors. The Inquisition noticed. Third flag. No canonical source establishes that orcs in Cain's engagements developed a specific, sustained theology around him comparable to Old Baal I. No orc warlord of Ghazghul stature has released Cain from captivity as theological certification. The mechanism applied to Cain here is scaled inference. The argument that a figure with Cain's documented reputation, operating repeatedly in orc-populated theaters across 2 centuries, would receive a diffuse, lower-intensity version of the same probability supplement that Yarrick receives at high concentration. It isn't stated in Mitchell's canon. Amberley Vale's editorial attention is the institutional fingerprint, not the proof. One observation the series itself never quite states: the comedy of the Cain canon is mechanically ideal. The gap between his heroic reputation and his self-assessed cowardice is precisely the format the Waaagh field would process most efficiently. The orcs who encounter Cain and fail to kill him carry that failure into the belief network. The specific narrative of how he survived, luck, misdirection, Jurgen's psychic null field, structural collapse, is irrelevant to the orcs. He survived against orcs. The belief transmits. The probability field updates. The man convinced he is doing it wrong is, from the mechanism's perspective, doing it correctly. The Golden Throne is failing. This isn't inference. The Lexicanum, citing The Master of Mankind by Aaron Dembski Bowden and multiple supporting canonical sources, documents the throne's degradation directly. Life support systems are failing. Power levels have degraded across millennia,
and the daily psyker sacrifice required to maintain the Emperor's binding has increased by approximately an order of magnitude since he was first placed on the throne.
The Fandom Wiki's Golden Throne article states plainly,
unless something is done, the Golden Throne's life support systems will eventually malfunction, and the Emperor of Mankind will die. Aaron Dembski-Bowden himself, in a 2017 interview, phrased the Emperor's canonical status precisely. There's no guarantee that the Emperor is anything other than a corpse with a residual mental ability to direct spacecraft. Now apply the mechanism. Orks regard the Emperor as the war god of humanity. Multiple canonical community sources, consistent with the Fandom Wiki's Gork and Mork documentation, confirm this. He isn't a figure they worship. Orks worship Gork and Mork exclusively. He is a figure they recognize and expect to fight. He is the human war god. He is the golden champion humanity sends against them.
The Fandom Wiki's own canonical description of Gork and Mork draws the structural parallel explicitly. The twin Ork gods are much like the Chaos gods, the lost Eldari pantheon, or the Emperor of Mankind's faith entity. The Emperor's warp presence is placed in direct structural parallel to the belief-generated entities the Ork race has sustained for millions of years. Gork and Mork exist because the Waaagh field creates them. The Emperor's warp presence is canonical. The mechanism by which collective psychic output sustains warp entities is canonical. The logical conclusion, that Ork collective belief in the Emperor as an active war god contributes something to his warp presence, is the synthesis this argument offers. It's consistent with both canonical mechanic systems. It isn't stated as a unified framework in any Games Workshop publication. Fourth and final flag. What follows is this script's construction, clearly labeled. The human imperial cult's billions of worshippers sustain the Emperor's identity in the warp. His existence as the God Emperor, the divine presence, the entity that is. The Ork warband's belief that a golden war god is still actively fighting them sustains something different. It sustains agency. The Emperor as a doing presence in the immaterium, not merely an existing one. Without the Ork belief in his continued warfare, the human cult's prayer produces a god who is present but inert. A warp entity of enormous identity and zero action. Both economies are required. The human cult sustains the corpus. The Ork belief sustains the action. Remove either one, and the throne's failure trajectory steepens. The imperial cult has operated for 10,000 years. The cultivation of Ork belief in an active human war god, through every campaign in the Ork Wars, every deliberate amplification of imperial heroes into Ork theological vocabulary, every operation that ensures the Orks continue to view the Golden War God as their active and ongoing enemy, has operated alongside it. The Inquisition manages the human cult through the ecclesiarchy. The program described here manages the Ork theological economy through channels that have no official name in any published text. None of it's safe. A Waaagh isn't permanent. The Lexicanum's Waaagh entry, citing Codex Orks 4th edition, states the termination conditions plainly. The field disperses at a Waagh's defeat, at the death of its war boss, or when it runs out of enemies. In the canonical example drawn from Predator, Prey, the death of a war boss caused Waaagh energy that had been keeping plasma reactors stable to collapse instantly. The field is a living process that requires continuous generation and continuous belief. It does not coast. 4 scenarios threaten the cultivation program's operational continuity. The Octarius War, the conflict between Tyranid Hive Fleet Leviathan and the Ork Empire of Octarius,
documented in 8th and 9th edition canonical material, has consumed Ork populations at sector scale. The Tyranids don't need to target the program specifically. They target Orks. Fewer Orks means a weaker Waaagh field. A weaker field means less probability supplementation for the cultivation's assets. The Foundation is being eaten by something that has no idea the Foundation exists. The Necron pylons are a different category of threat.
The Lexicanum's pylon entry describes devices employing negatively empirically charged noctilith in order to dampen the effects of the warp. The fandom wiki is specific. The pylons acted as anti-psychic field emitters, restricting the activity of the immaterium in proximity to them. They suppress all immaterium interaction in their operational zone. They don't discriminate between chaos warp corruption and Waaagh field outputs. Sufficient pylon density in a key operational theater suppresses the probability effects the cultivation program depends on. Cadia had pylons. Cadia no longer has anything. The Great Rift's formation, documented in the 8th edition rulebook, transforming half of Armageddon into a demon world, introduced competing theological content into the most active cultivation theater in the galaxy. Demonic entities, chaos champions, and the direct psychic output of multiple chaos gods now operate in close proximity to the Waaagh field at Armageddon. Ork theological attention isn't unlimited. Chaos does not need to know the program exists to compete with it. It only needs to be more immediately spectacular than a golden war god operating through a very old commissar with a bionic eye. The current three-way war at Armageddon, Orks, Chaos, and the Imperium all generating active warp events simultaneously, is the most challenging operational environment the cultivation program has faced in its documented history. The direct defeat scenario is the most immediate fragility. The Waaagh field updates based on observed outcomes. Orks believe what they witness. A sufficiently visible, sufficiently final Imperial defeat, one in which Yarrick dies on a battlefield the Ork survivors carry home as cultural memory, does not merely damage the cultivation program, it inverts it. Ork belief in Yarrick's mortality is functionally hostile input. It feeds back through the same field mechanism that currently extends his survival.
Old Baali can die.
The belief creates the condition. The condition increases the probability of the outcome. The program's operators know this. Every cultivation operation is simultaneously a suppression operation. Every channel seeding Yarrick immortality narratives is also actively working to suppress Yarrick mortality narratives before they propagate into the theological network at scale. The Inquisition isn't simply planting seeds. It's managing the information environment of millions of Orks across multiple star systems, in real time, continuously. For 57 years between the two Armageddon wars, the management held. The reconstructed Czevak review, narrative framing, not a documented canonical entry, stated for the final time, asks one question it can't answer on its final completed page. What happens when they stop believing? The structural answer is assembled from the canonical record. Yarrick is very old.
He fights at ages that require either rejuvenation access or probability supplementation to explain. And the distinction matters because rejuvenation explains the baseline longevity, while the specific combat survival pattern across multiple high-casualty Ork engagements at the most contested theater in the segmentum solar isn't what rejuvenation produces. Remove the probability supplement. Remove Ork belief in old Baali's unkillability. Leave the rejuvenation. His odds in direct combat revert to what the physical reality of his injuries and his years actually support. Cain is over 200 years old. He is, by the Lexicanum's canonical record, dead by the time Amberley Vale finishes compiling his archive. He survived to that age against everything the 41st millennium could produce. Remove the diffuse probability field generated by 2 centuries of reputation propagation through Ork-populated theaters. Observe what the earlier career engagements look like without it.
The Emperor has been on the Golden Throne for 10,000 years. The maintenance requirements have increased tenfold. The failure trajectory is canonical. The human imperial cult sustains his identity in the warp. The Ork theological economy, the sustained belief of uncountable Orks that the golden war god of humanity is actively fighting them, managed through 10,000 years of military history and deliberate cultivation, sustains his agency. Remove the second economy. The first economy maintains what it has always maintained, an existence, not an action. Aaron Dembski-Bowden put the terminal state plainly. No guarantee the Emperor is anything other than a corpse with a residual mental ability. Remove the Ork belief that makes him more than that in the immaterium. That is what remains. On page 388 of the reconstructed Czevak review, in the hand of whoever succeeded Czevak as this program's operational authority, is a single annotation.
This is a narrative framing device, explicitly stated as such,
Not a documented canonical entry. The annotation, paraphrased as this script's own construction, we won't allow them to stop believing. That directive has been in operational force, by inference from the documented history, for approximately 10,000 years. The Inquisition is the only intelligence apparatus in the galaxy that knows the Wall exists. The Wall is the cultivation. The foundation of the Wall is the Orks. The Imperium's most numerous, most persistent, most theologically potent alien enemy is also the most critical strategic asset in the Imperium's classified operational history. The Codex Imperialis calls the policy containment. The annotation on page 388 knows what it actually is. The day the Imperium finally wins against the Orks, the last Waaagh dispersed, the last war boss dead, the field gone quiet, isn't a victory. It's the day the Wall loses its foundation.
the day Yarrick's odds revert.
The day Cain's archive closes for reasons other than old age. The day the throne accelerates toward the failure mode it has been decelerating away from for 10 millennia. The Emperor sits on the golden throne. He has been waiting, sustained by 2 belief economies, for 10,000 years. So have they. Subscribe for more stories like this.